we stand on the brink of a transformative era, the shift towards sustainable energy sources is not only essential for tackling climate change, but also crucial for ensuring long-term energy security and economic growth. To redefine energy, technology and sustainability in India, Honeywell and CNBC TV18 hosted an exclusive India Energy Transition Summit in the national capital. The summit brought together policymakers, industry leaders and visionaries to discuss innovative technologies, sustainable practices and strategic investments that can accelerate the transition to clean energy. Starting the evening's proceedings, Honeywell India's President Ashish Modi addressed the distinguished audience to set the context.
You cannot really achieve the net zero goal that the Prime Minister has set for us to achieve by 2070 unless we have solved the problem of hard-to-abate sectors. And therefore, today we have set up this session to tackle this problem. And in my mind, you cannot really solve this problem alone. And this is one of the problems that is plaguing our generation. You cannot really solve this alone. So the academia, the industry, the technology providers like us, the government, the policymakers have to come together to find a solution. And therefore, this evening, we have been very careful in choosing the panels we have set up. From a Honeywell perspective, we have a lot of technology in each of these areas that, of course, our my colleagues will be talking about as we go through these panels. And I hope that today's sessions will give you some food for thought. Because as you go back, and you are the industry leaders and the champions, as you go back, hopefully the discussions today will help in solving the problem and take this discussion forward and the solution forward.
Honeywell's Chief Sustainability Officer, Dr. Gavin Towler, who is at the forefront of innovation in sustainable technology, shared his insights into how the organization is enhancing sustainability within its operations and for its customers.
When we talk about sustainability, the United Nations definition of sustainability was meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this is what sustainability is all about. It's about designing a world for our children, for our grandchildren, so that we solve the problems rather than pass them on unsolved. Honeywell's sustainability offerings, when we talk about sustainability, we mean technologies that lead to improved safety, reduced environmental impact, and increased societal resilience. And that's technologies that we sell to our business customers to deliver those outcomes of safety, environmental impact, and societal resilience for the communities that they serve, for their customers. Everyone, you hear the word sustainability a lot, and everyone is talking about this. 55% of major corporations have set a target for reducing their own CO2 emissions to zero. And 90% of executives report that they're increasing their investment in sustainable technologies and in sustainability initiatives. But nobody has all of the technologies needed to do this. Nobody is able to solve the entire problem. And this is where a company like Honeywell that has a long, long history in automation, in energy and fuels processing, and in the aerospace and aviation sector, this is where we can help and help our customers and their communities to achieve their sustainability goals. So Honeywell has been working on our own sustainability since 2004, which was when we first hired a Chief Sustainability Officer. We've already reduced our carbon dioxide emissions by 90%. And this has been done through 6,300 projects across all of our sites, our manufacturing, our offices around the world, to address our own carbon footprint, largely using our own technology. And we've remediated land, we've reduced our water consumption. 60% of Honeywell's R&D spend actually goes towards these outcomes of sustainability, of environmental impact, safety, and societal resilience. But our leadership in addressing environmental impact goes well beyond the technology that we use in our own facilities. When you look across all of Honeywell, Honeywell is a $36 billion company. 60% of that is these sustainable outcomes technologies. So that's $21 billion of revenue comes from safety, environmental impact, and societal resilience. Across a whole range of different things, from measuring and reporting, energy efficiency, electrification, specific solutions for net zero, circularity, and safety and societal resilience. But we aren't done. We have set goals for the future, and we've just completed our fourth round of greenhouse gas reduction goals. We just met our targets that we had set for 2023. Our next target is a 50% reduction in our US energy use by 2030. And by 2030, we'll reduce our US energy use 50%. I'm pleased to announce today, we've actually reduced our India carbon footprint already by 52%. Between 2023 and 2030, we expect that through our customers, we will avoid 2 billion tons of CO2. That's 175 times the whole emissions that Honeywell will have over the same time period, equivalent to 33 million American homes, and it would be a lot more than 33 million Indian homes because India is much more energy efficient than the United States.
India Energy Transition Summit was graced by the Honorable Union Minister for Petroleum and Natural Gas, Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, who has been steering India's energy policy towards sustainability.
Let's talk about the energy transition, sir. And one of the decisions, in fact, the first decision taken by the cabinet in the third term of the government was the solar rooftop scheme that the Prime Minister announced, and it got the cabinet approval and the cabinet nod. So it's very clear that this continues to be an area of priority for the government, both in terms of bandwidth as well as in terms of government resources. Now, lay out for me what you believe have been the major milestones achieved so far.
The green transition, you mentioned the solar rooftops, very significant. That's a scheme which is, I think, very dear to the Prime Minister's heart, but it's one of many steps that he has taken. When he assumed responsibility in 2014, our total biofuel blending was 1.53%, if I remember correctly. Today, last month, I think we did 15.8%. We are today, in terms of biofuel blending, the second largest economy. I mean, Brazil, us, we've overtaken the United States in terms of sheer volumes because our population base, our consumption. By the way, 67 million people go to fill up at the retail stations every day.
Yeah.
Now, 67 million, 6.7 crore people, which means if your blending target is 20% by ethanol year ending October 2025,
That's
which is
right.
1 year from now, we've already saved 99,000 crores on foreign exchange. We've given our farmers money. So it's a conversion of, you're turning the providers, your annadatas are also becoming urjadatas. They are becoming providers for it. So there are a lot of things going on.
One of the other aspects that was being talked about, and again, that's being prioritized by the government by way of PLI schemes, etc., the battery storage aspect and the battery storage systems as well, Mr. Puri. If you can give us some sense of what we should now expect in light of the measures that have already been taken.
Look, I can tell you, battery storage, for green hydrogen, pump storage, you have to produce those on a large scale in order to make these kind of fuels workable. In the case of green hydrogen, let me tell you, what you do is you take water up to a height several thousand feet and you drop it from there. You produce the electricity. That electricity then you use in order to produce green hydrogen. So it requires large acreage, and the companies which are involved in it with foreign investment are setting up these 3,000-acre sites along the coastline.
Yeah.
When it comes to green hydrogen, I'm sorry I'm going away from battery storage.
No, not at all.
To green hydrogen.
Yeah.
Green hydrogen succeeds or will succeed. It's a fuel of the future. You need to bring the cost down. And you can only bring the cost down provided you manufacture on scale in places where there is large demand, where you can produce it and you can consume it. Because the gas in and of itself does not lend itself to transportation. Maybe the green ammonia does, and therefore those companies are setting up export targets. But all in all, on all these fronts, apart from the availability and affordability, the green transition, whether it is You're talking about solar panels, rooftop panels. You're
Yeah.
talking about biofuels. By the way, I have no hesitation in saying that, at least in my mind, we are no longer looking at a 20% ceiling on biofuel blending. The 20% was put there because that 20% is the figure at which the existing parts of the components of the automobile don't need to be changed.
Right.
But today you can go into a filling station and get a kit which will help you in case there's a problem. In all that, we will have to maintain the economic viability.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Puri, for making it very clear the direction that we're heading in and the next steps and what the future looks like. We wish you the very best of luck as you navigate a very difficult, a very challenging environment, a very difficult global environment. And we look forward to hearing more from you on each of these issues that you've given us a very comprehensive snapshot on. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri, a big round of applause. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here this evening.
Let's take cue from what the guidance that the minister today gave us, and let's begin with talking about emergence of green hydrogen. Let me begin by asking you, Mr. Modi, I'll just open the floor up to all the panelists just to set the context, just to set the ball rolling. When we speak of green hydrogen, it's one of the latest kids on the block. It's like the Gen Z of fuels. So when you look at the Gen Z, this latest fuel, where does it sit in the galaxy of fuels, in the basket of fuels that we currently have, especially when we compare it against some of the more conventional alternatives? What do we mean when we say emergence of hydrogen as a replacement for carbon?
Yeah, thanks, Ashmit. Look, I mean, if you look at the pure offering of green hydrogen and why it's so attractive is that there's no carbon in hydrogen. And therefore, naturally, it is a very attractive fuel. The challenge, however, is that hydrogen is a tough fuel. And it is tough because it's a small molecule. It is in some sense, hard to handle, but it can really revolutionize the entire world, should it work. And therefore, to your question around where it sits in the basket of things, and if you look at India and what India is doing, and when I compare it to a lot of the other economies, India has put a stake in the ground to say we are going to go green hydrogen. And I think that's a brilliant move because India has abundant solar. And what's needed, the biggest cost that is needed to produce green hydrogen is actually electricity. And there's other costs associated with the capex part. But given that electricity is a big part of the cost structure, and India has abundant solar, you've solved one part of the equation. Having said that, you still have a long way to go to bring the cost down. And I think in my mind, if I were to pick one thing to begin with for us to be successful as the country, it's solving for the cost. And if you're able to solve it to a point where it becomes a switching fuel with respect to many other fuels, it can really revolutionize the world.
Mr. Shah, of course, being a critical part of that journey in taking this fuel forward. Give us your sense, opening remarks, emergence of green hydrogen.
So I think the Honorable Minister very, very correctly stated, that it's not only to be considered as a fuel, because right now you have a basket of fuels, and he very correctly said that there's going to be the other fuels also which will coexist. So the emergence is possibly more if you look at hydrogen as a feedstock. And that's important because typical fuel, replacement of a conventional fossil fuel with hydrogen will take time. But what will happen is the feedstock, like what he said, my oil marketing companies, they use gray hydrogen. So that's a feedstock. So where do you use green hydrogen as a feedstock? In fertilizers, in steel plants, and many others. So I think rather than just categorizing it as a fuel, naturally it is a fuel of the future, but in the present context, I would rather look at it more like a feedstock, which actually is an input to many of the industries.
Interesting insights. Mr. Kulkarni, coming to you, give us the big money view. How, as this fuel develops, how is big money looking at it?
I think before big money, if you look at the countries, and India clearly is an important one, but as of now, there are 53 countries who have a stated hydrogen policy. in terms of targets that they want to achieve for hydrogen to contribute a certain portion in terms of volume for their energy chain. Which means I think it's one of the more interesting energy transition sources that number of important countries in the world, including the largest energy consumers, are actively focused on. So that's one. When that happens, and when governments actually set some of these important agendas, and then the governments also follow up through interesting schemes to scale up the business, financing generally follows. So what we are now seeing is early stages of, I think, the governments in many parts of the world setting up programs for manufacturing, setting up volume targets, and therefore financing is coming in. And therefore we do think, particularly 2024, 2025, is a big time where hydrogen transitions into becoming more mainstream from a financing perspective.
Mr. Modi, coming back to you on the issue of when we talk of global value chains, where does India sit as a part of this value chain? I remember going back to some of the conversations where we had earlier, where you said that while it may be a challenge because it's the Gen Z of fuels, it is also an opportunity for India to take leadership. Give us more light on that.
Yeah, I think I said that in my opening, because if India is really able to solve the cost position, I think naturally India takes the leadership position. And several countries, if you look around, have taken this middle path of let's do blue hydrogen. Let's take natural gas and break it and produce hydrogen, and then we'll sequester the carbon and this and that. And that's like, to me, a middle path, and you're trying to be on both boats. But that's not really what India is doing. So what India has done is actually a very, very bold thing by saying we are going to commit ourselves to green hydrogen. So that's number one. In terms of what can be done in terms of where India sits in global value chain, look, today, and again, I'll defer it to Derek to talk about it, and Costa, they see the global markets, and Derek is actually solving the problem. I'm just talking here, is that we are making electrolyzers with the help of PLIs. I think India needs to own the technology versus become the system integrator or assembler of the technology by taking technology from different countries. I think that will change the game. And we have to lead with the fact that we are going to solve this problem for our domestic markets. We take that view, and we double down on the technology development versus reducing the cost because we are just the best assemblers. I think that's the position we need to take in this space because, mind you, we have an advantage. We have taken the space of saying we will go green hydrogen. And now we got to go the technology way. That's my view.
That's an interesting point about wanting India to be at the core of the technology rather than just merely being an outlier, being an assembler. Mr. Kulkarni, your quick thoughts, where India sits on the GVC?
I think I agree with Ashish that effectively owning and adopting the technology is going to be very important, and developing those technologies is also even more important. But the way I look at the GVC currently for India, clearly, I think for renewable energy, India already is one of the cheapest place to produce renewable energy, particularly through a combination of solar and wind, just given the natural ecosystem we have. The other interesting advantage for us is the whole excitement about pump hydro storage systems, which is, I think, what Minister also talked about. India is one of the largest capacities on a global basis to create pump hydro systems at scale. And the third big advantage is, surprisingly, the project development times in India, now for renewable as well as pump hydro and battery storage systems, is amongst the shorter end compared to larger mega markets. In particular, let's say if you compare it to US and Europe, India could actually benefit from relatively smaller development time, and every 6 months or a year saved in completion time saves a lot of value and suddenly makes your pricing a lot more competitive. To me, I think that's other big advantage that India currently enjoys. And if you start, therefore, developing it at scale, in the next 3 to 4 years, you'll suddenly have the first product coming out at a price point which is so attractive and competitive that you start setting the price rather than you taking the price. So I think that's really the journey that we need to track for India between now and 2030.
Mr. Shah, you sit at the core of the technology.
Yeah, so I think partly addressed here that the technology has to be owned, because at the end of the day, yes, we can't be, living on borrowed technology. A lot of work is being done. So going forward, when these technologies, and especially are available in India with companies and homegrown, because see, one of the issues is the technology. The other part is, how do you indigenize it to manufacture those equipments without resorting to, importing components.
How do we mainstream green hydrogen? How do we mainstream hydrogen? The current systems that we have don't provide for a plug-and-play solution, at least not as far as hydrogen is concerned. So what does this journey ahead looks like in terms of mainstreaming the fuel?
My answer is simple. Get the cost down to replace natural gas. I think if you get the cost down to that levels, everything else will get done. The infrastructure will get built, everything will fall in place, the demand will come, you get the cost down, everything will fall in place.
I think those are such fantastic thoughts coming in, because right at the beginning of this evening, we've set the tone that that's the way forward, that for any movement forward, it's the cost component. I think that will be at the heart of demand, that will be at the heart of migrating, that will be at the heart of this journey forward. So on that note, I'd like to thank all of our panelists, Mr. Shah, Mr. Modi, Mr. Kulkarni. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Honeywell is spearheading the energy transition with its sustainable technologies. And through the India Energy Transition Summit, it is reinforcing its commitment towards accelerating clean energy transition and help India achieve its sustainability goals.
Honeywell and CNBC 18, they have organized a summit on the sustainable energy. And as I have already mentioned in my remarks also, that together a media house, a prestigious media house, and a prestigious company which is working in this sector, if they do come together, then they can create more awareness. The awareness, making the people educated, making the people more awareness is the best way to achieve the target.
I think India is going to lead the energy transition journey. As you can see, India is home to a country which has explored every possible mechanism for both ensuring energy security, ensuring a just, orderly and equitable energy transition.
It's a big initiative. I think every industry is participating, whoever is the stakeholder, be it the supply side sector or the demand side sectors, and everybody is now, they are mobilized now, because India has taken a call for reaching the net zero by 2070. So a lot of, I see that recently the IFGA has also done some the workshop, and the Honeywell on energy transition. I think it's a good step forward.